Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. I trust and hope that you are all well. This video is going to be a unique one because you all waited so long while I recovered from my sinus issues. I decided to bring you a video that you can enjoy and is going to be rather long. Don't forget, if you enjoy what you are hearing, down below in the description box, if you would like to buy me a coffee, it is truly appreciated, as it helps support me in the channel. As well, if you'd like to become a member of Back to Ashes, it only starts at $1.99 a month. Down below in the description box, you can find out all the perks that come along with that. Now, it is time to go back to ashes, for when we arise from the ashes, we are a bigger, brighter, stronger, and happier person in the morning. Now, sit back, relax, kick back, grab a snack, or tuck in to get warm, and prepare for this dose of vocal melatonin entitled True Scary Stories. Quick disclaimer, while most of these stories will be true, some of them will not be true. I will announce it at the beginning of every story. Right after this introduction, there will be an ad. I'll read the first story, there'll be a second ad, and going forward, there will be no more ads within the video. Disclaimer, some of these stories may have content not suitable for all. Listening discretion is advised. True story. The Tall Man. The story is rather weird and is a currently continuous thing. Going to bed has always been a safe haven for me until I moved to a new house. I share a room with my sister and 2 dogs, which is fine by me. And that seems to be the only way I can sleep in this house. One night, sleeping, I get this weird guttural feeling, as if someone was going to do something to me. It was as if someone was hovering over my bed, watching me. At this point, I was asleep but woken up to this feeling. I could move and such, but I didn't open my eyes. Something told me not to. I quickly ducked my head and feet under my blanket and shook uncontrollably until the feeling had resided. A few nights later, I get the same feeling, but I had no idea what it was. I was already under my covers, suffocating, thinking this was going to happen again. I wanted to know what made me feel like this, so I opened a small covering under the blanket to let some light, through the nightlight, through. I have a walk-in closet that has no door and leads to the bathroom. My bed on the opposite side of the room from it. I look in the general area and see a man in black sort of just sitting there. He was huge, literally almost as tall as my closet, with oddly squared shoulders. I was so scared I didn't even blink. What made it worse was my largest dog was also looking in the general area, alert. The man was just standing in the corner next to my sister's bed. I pulled the covers back over my head and didn't move until the feeling is gone. At first I thought it was a dream until I told my sister about the incident, and she goes, "You saw him too?" I am still freaked the F out and scared about it. Not to mention when I'm just chilling in certain areas and such, I feel like someone is watching me. I turn around quickly, and as soon as I turn around, someone is smiling and ducking back behind a corner. There are more things to tell, but these things still sort of happen and are gut-wrenching, and I live in fear of my own house every day. Fictional story. It's almost May 8th, and I think I'm in danger. My sister Martha vanished when I was 12. It was a normal day otherwise. We ate breakfast with our parents, did some chores, and when we were done, we asked if we could go ride our bikes to the park. Our parents seemed nervous and told us to stick close to the house. I was pretty indifferent, but I remember Martha was furious. She stormed to her room and slammed the door. Mom and Dad tried to talk to her, but she sulked in her room silently for the rest of the day. When Mom yelled to her to come down for dinner, she didn't answer. My father knocked on her door a few times, but Martha didn't answer. After increasingly frantic calls didn't get her attention, he threw his shoulder against the door, breaking the lock and sending it reeling into the room. Martha was gone. The police came that night. I talked to them for hours, answering questions about where she may have gone, but I had no clue. She never mentioned running away, other than a little teenage angst. She was a happy girl. She never came home. The police stopped coming by, and I silently accepted that we would never see her again. When I tried to mention her, my parents would shut down. Late one night, though, I heard them talking quietly in their bedroom as I stood in the hallway. "Her window was locked," my mother said. "Even the cops mentioned it. You know she didn't run away." Maybe she did," my father replied. "It doesn't mean she won't come back." "Yes, it does," my mother erupted. "None of your family called to say any of their family vanished. It finally happened to us, and now our baby is gone." I never asked my parents what they were talking about, but I wished I had. Maybe they would have explained it to me. They divorced the year I left for college. Most of the years, after Martha had vanished, were filled with silent dinners. My mother always seemed so mad at my father, and I couldn't understand why. I was shocked when my father drunkenly called 5 years ago to tell me my mother had disappeared. The cops did a welfare check when she stopped showing up for work. Her purse and keys were still there. My father sobbed, muttering an apology that I couldn't understand. He went missing a year ago tomorrow, the same set of circumstances. A detective told me they would put out a bulletin with his photo, but I knew I would never see him again. After my mother went missing, I cleaned out her apartment. On the bedside table was a journal. The last entry said that someone in my father's family vanished every year on May 8th. They all vanished on the same day each year. I don't know how many relatives he has left, but it's nearly midnight and I think someone is watching my house from the street. True story. Headless bird in the back country. For context, I live in a very rural area in the midwestern part of the United States. About 20 minutes away from the nearest town and about 6 minutes from the nearest township. For those of you who have lived in the sticks, you know as well as I that creepy sounds and sightings that make you second guess what you saw are commonplace if you spend any amount of time outdoors at night. It was 3:30 on a Saturday morning. I was driving home alone from a party. On a small, lightless country road leading out of the nearest township to my house, there are 2 cemeteries. The old cemetery and the one that they still actively plant people in. These cemeteries are on either side of the road and are about 200 feet from each other, or roughly 61 meters. I had just passed the second cemetery and taken a curve into a part of the forest that was especially dense. No moonlight penetrated the canopy of the trees that reached across the road. I slowed down in case a deer decided to jump out in front of me, as was frequent in that area. That's when I saw it. There was a large, dark mass in the middle of the road. At first, I thought perhaps it was a limb or a dog of some sort, but as my headlights illuminated the creature, I knew all too well that this was abnormal at best. There, standing in the road, was a large black bird, the size of a vulture or eagle. However, it had no head. Now, as an educated hillbilly, I know fully well that when a bird roosts, it tucks its head under its wings in many cases, and that could fully explain this. That is what logic and reason would tell you, although I have never known a bird to roost on the ground, let alone in the middle of the road. I stopped my Jeep about 10 yards, 9-ish meters, from the bird with my headlights illuminating it. I sat and pondered the situation for a moment and honked to see if it would startle the bird into flying away. It did not stir. I sat for a moment longer, and this horrible sense of dread filled my soul. I then decided to drive carefully around the sleeping bird. I stopped and rolled down my window and shone a light down on it to get a better look up close. Instead of finding a tucked head, I looked down the bloody gullet of a decapitated specimen. From there, I must admit my terror was real, and I made haste in leaving this unsavory omen behind. The next morning, the bird was gone without a trace. True story. The old lady. This all happened a couple of years ago. To give a little bit of a background, I, who am a female, own a holiday house out in the country that I look forward to every summer. I go for weeks to months on end and love it. The only issue is it is slightly isolated. The closest neighbors are about a 20-minute walk, and they are the only people on my street or near me. I want to add that this house is over 100 years old, as it is a small cottage, and has been passed through the family for generations. The neighbors are farmers, so are not usually home. This all went down one Tuesday morning. I was baking with the door open to let in fresh air, as it was sunny outside, and we don't normally get that in Ireland. A knock at the open door jolted me from my daydream-like state. A somewhat raspy voice called out, "Hello, Dreary." I was taken aback. I shot around to see a small old lady at my door. Her short gray hair twinkled in the sun. I said hello and asked what she needed. She claimed that she didn't want to interrupt us and asked if this was an okay time. I replied, of course, but emphasized again on what she was doing, now practically standing in our kitchen. She asked me, did we know Mary? I answered no. I have never met somebody named Mary, surprisingly. She said that was all right and left. I only realized as she walked out the door that she might have been lost or needed a lift home, as the road isn't safe due to the tractors. In our house, you have to go left straight after you head out the door to get to the wall and gate. The wall is quite small, so anybody can hop it or sit on it. I ran out the door after her to see nothing. There was no electric cars at that time, so she couldn't have been using that. I have a very clear view of up and down the road for many miles, and I still can't see her. It was like she had just disappeared. This story still freaks me out to this day. I only realized today that the very original owner of the house's name is Mary. I hope she rests well knowing that there's a family that loves her house as much as she did when she was alive. Fiction. Creature in the Woods. It was supposed to be a routine camping trip. My wife, 2 kids, and I have been doing this every year for as long as I can remember. There's something special about camping in the fall. The leaves turning amber and gold, the crisp air, and the sound of twigs crunching underfoot. But this year, something sinister found us. We set up camp in our usual spot, a clearing by a small stream. We were all excited to spend a few days disconnected from the world, just enjoying nature and each other's company. We roasted marshmallows, played board games, and went on hikes. Everything was perfect until the second night. I was awakened by a strange noise outside our tent. It sounded like something was dragging itself through the underbrush. I assumed it was a deer or a bear, so I shook it off and went back to sleep. But then, the noises continued, growing louder and more persistent. I tried to ignore them, but they kept getting closer and closer. That's when I saw it. A grotesque creature, unlike anything I had ever seen before. Its skin was mottled and leathery. Its eyes were black and soulless, and its limbs were twisted and gnarled with horrifyingly long and thin fingers, ending in razor-sharp talons. It stood at the entrance of our tent, staring at us with an intense, unblinking gaze. I tried to scream, but my voice caught in my throat. My wife and kids were awake now, huddled together in fear. The creature didn't move or make a sound. It just stared at us as if it was studying us. The next few hours were a blur of terror. The creature didn't attack us physically, but it tormented us mentally. It whispered horrible things in our ears, things that made us doubt our sanity and question our grip on reality. It showed us visions of our worst nightmares, playing on our deepest fears and insecurities. We were trapped, helpless and alone in the middle of the woods with this monster. We couldn't run or fight back. We were at its mercy. It was like it was feeding off of our fear and desperation, growing stronger with each passing moment. Finally, as dawn began to break, the thing retreated back into the woods, leaving us shaken and traumatized. We packed up our things and left the campsite as quickly as we could, never looking back. That experience changed us all in ways we couldn't fully comprehend. We stopped going camping, stopped seeking out the beauty of nature. The memory of the creature haunted us, a constant reminder of the darkness that lurks just beyond the edge of our perception. Fiction. The ocean speaks at night. 2 more weeks, 14 more days, and I can get off this goddamn ship. My crew of 6 men have grown sick and tired. We can all feel it now. It's been 2 months already, and with each night, with each empty bottle of liquor that runs dry, I can feel our minds beginning to slip. Water's no good. Whole supply's been contaminated by something. We don't even know what. So now it's vodka. "Where the F is the captain?" growled one of my more annoying crewmates directly outside of my quarter doors. I opened the door to the hot deck, heat waves flaring over the entire vessel. Other crew members lay around under makeshift tents of cloth for shade. "What's your problem, freak show?" I questioned. "What's my problem?" he emoted. "What's your problem? We're out here baking like tits, and you're in the quarters jacking it." Several crew members laughed. I turned around to avoid argument, but I felt their stares on my neck as I headed towards the steering wheel. My paranoia set in. They must be plotting something against me. I feel panicked as I open my personal booze bottle and chug the entire thing. This moment of fear was when I realized I'm running out of time before the crew realizes we are lost in the middle of the ocean, while they still think I know where we are. Tonight, we run out of alcohol. I waltzed down the ladder and towards my crew. "Gentlemen, we're going home." While I expected a cheer, nobody said a word. "I think we'll be back by tomorrow morning." The men looked over the edge of the vessel to see land, with none in sight. "Anyways, I'll be in my quarters." I locked the door behind me. 6 hours later. I peer out of the back window of my room. The glowing moon shines over the wavy seas around us. It's sad to think I'll have no clue where I've died. I grab a Glock 19 from my bedside and head out of the captain's quarters into the windy night. I can see relatively well. The ship's lights illuminate most of the deck, while the moon gleamed on the metal everywhere else. I approach my men, who stood in a circle near the bow of the ship. "Crew, what the hell are you guys doing?" 2 idiots of the crew immediately grab my arms as I've begun to scream out for help. I begged them to release me as the rest of the crew began spitting on me and taunting me, laughing as they did it. They tied me to my bed and wheeled it out to the back of the ship. "You lied to us, Captain," cried one of the men. "It was you who contaminated the water, and there's no land in sight." I quickly realized this must be the last moment of my life. They begun stomping on my head and face before one man makes the command. I spit out my teeth and cry out, "Wait, stop, no, 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 please." I felt the weight of the bed violently shift as it toppled over the back of the ship directly towards the sea below. The black ocean consumed me as the bed landed with me, face down underwater. I writhed to flip the bed back over and stared with my eyes open into the abyss, out of breath. I was thirsty, starving, and tired as I begun swaying with the waves, the bed keeping my back to the water's surface, but my arms dangled down as I faded into black. True story. A rattle at the door. This happened around 2015 when I, a 25-year-old female, was alone at my upstairs apartment with my normally very calm, quiet, older cattle dog. I was sitting on the couch against the wall with the front door to my immediate left, on the same wall that the couch was up against, so I could look to my left and the doorknob was arm's length and in clear view. I was scrolling on my phone through creepypastas and urban legends, trying to find a good story that would really give me the chills. My dog was sleeping soundly at my feet. For the life of me, I cannot find the story that I had then come across when a chill ran down my spine. I hear something and look over to see the doorknob rattling hard. I jumped up so fast, startled, but thinking it was an earthquake, and looked around to notice nothing else was shaking. Still trying to process what was happening, I see my dog standing in front of the door, hair on his back standing straight up, tail poofed out, teeth bared, growling at the door. I had never seen him act like that before, but his face looked confused. The doorknob continued to rattle loudly, not like someone was turning it from outside, but shaking fast and hard. I could physically see it shaking from a few feet away. It seemed to last minutes, but I'm sure the whole thing happened within 30 seconds. I, being freaked out, quickly and without thinking, closed out the story on my phone and the rattling stopped. My dog and I looked at each other and exchanged confused glances. I stood there for a minute with my dog at my side and told myself I was just overreacting, and I was just jumpy because I had been reading all those scary stories. I took a deep breath and said, "Hello?" No answer. I felt silly. Maybe my now ex was home early and just trying to get inside in a hurry or something. I reached for the doorknob, unlocked it, and opened the door. As the door opened, I took a step outside and leaned halfway out, looking around. Nothing. The stairs to downstairs were empty to my left along the wall, and there was just a wall to my right with no one in sight. To this day, I don't know what caused the rattling. That day, I opted out of my scary story search and instead curled up on the couch with my dog and binge-watched episodes of Friends the rest of the evening. I never had any more experiences in that apartment after that. You probably have been wondering what the story was that I came across before the rattling started. I didn't get the chance to start reading it, but I remember it being something about a Japanese war nurse. I'm not even sure if it's actually related or if it was just a coincidence, but I'd love to hear your options either way. I tried looking for it again since then, but no luck. If anyone thinks they may know what it was and what happened, I'm open to solving this case once and for all. Fiction. Hunted. Albert panted as he rushed through the sunlit woods, sweat trickling down his temples. His eyes remained locked on the back of the sprinting girl in the distance, her shape coming in and out of view intermittently as she darted across the trees. Low-hanging branches scratched at his face as he charged past them, but he couldn't feel their sting. His heart was pounding in his chest, adrenaline pumping through his veins in anticipation. He knew how this ended, and she did too. She was simply delaying the inevitable, which he'd come to understand as a fundamental aspect of the game. It was half the fun. A malicious grin spread across his lips as a shriek reached his ears. Mustering all his strength, he converged toward its position like a shark on a blood trail. The trees tapered as he approached, their canopy thinning to reveal a small clearing up ahead. The man's sprint segued to an amble as he neared her fallen shape in the middle of the glade. She was clutching at her ankle, fine glinting lines spilling down her cheeks, her pink school bag lying at her side. He halted at the threshold of the clearing to catch his breath as he observed his prey. She looked so innocent, with her green floral dress and her pigtails dangling down the sides of her face. Please, the girl said as she raised a hand in front of her, placatingly, bringing her bag close with the other. You said we were friends. Well, Lizzie, he started as he pulled a large knife from the leather holster around his waist. This one's on your daddy. He squatted, bringing himself to her level. He found out who I am and told everyone. I mean, I get it. It's his job. What with being the chief of police and all, but still. He opened the blade towards her. You're going to be my farewell gift to him before I skip town. His grin stretched. And I'll make you my best one yet. Lizzie's lips tightened. She was going to be an actress, you know. The man frowned. What? Abby. Abby? His eyes widened as a gunshot echoed through the forest. Seconds later, a burning sensation erupted in his guts as a dark crimson stain spread across his green shirt. Albert howled in pain as he fell back, hands clasped over his stomach as blood splurted between his fingers. He watched in agony as the girl stood, smoke billowing from the barrel of the gun in her hand, her countenance hard between dried tears. She was my friend, she spat, mouth quivering. I saw what you did to her. I saw the pictures on my dad's desk. He screamed obscenities through the suffering. The girl just glared at him. My dad always said a bullet in the gut is a bad way to go. She backtracked a bit and sat back down. I guess we'll find out soon enough. Fiction. The Fourth Wall. Beneath the vivid studio lights, Adam's heart raced as he took his place on stage. He had dreamt of this moment, when the trivial knowledge he had amassed would finally be put to the test on the grandest scale. The host, a tall man with a sardonic smile, welcomed the contestants, his voice dripping with an intoxicating blend of charm and menace. As the questions flew, Adam's mind worked like a well-oiled machine, his answers tumbling out like pearls from a broken necklace. But as the game progressed, the atmosphere grew heavier, the air thick with a mounting dread that seeped into the very bones of the contestants. One by one they faltered, their voices trembling as they faced the host's increasingly insidious questions. Each wrong answer seemed to cut into the contestants' souls, leaving them ashen-faced and hollow-eyed. The host's eyes glinted like those of a predator, his smile widening with each contestant's demise. The audience's applause, once enthusiastic, now felt strained and fearful. Adam, driven by an unspoken terror, rose to the top, his knowledge his only lifeline. As the final round approached, the remaining contestants stared blankly, the light of hope extinguished in their eyes. "Congratulations," the host purred, circling Adam like a vulture. "You've made it to the final question. Answer correctly, and you'll leave here unscathed." The room seemed to close in on Adam, the silence a crushing weight on his chest. He felt the host's gaze bore into him, an ancient malevolence lurking beneath the silken voice. He whispered the question, a riddle that echoed through the ages. What walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 legs at noon, and 3 legs in the evening? With a surge of adrenaline, Adam recognized the ancient riddle and answered, "Man." He felt a momentary relief, but the host's smile only grew more sinister. "Well done," the host murmured, his voice a dark promise. "But now, for my dear audience listening to this story, I have one final riddle." The world seems to freeze as the host speaks directly to the listeners at this very moment, and the listeners are left to ponder the host's malevolent riddle as he stares directly into their soul, his eyes gleaming with malevolence as he utters, "Locked away I hide, in day and night side by side, yet both defy me when revealed, for in their light I am sealed. What am I?" The Sphinx's laughter echoes as the fourth wall is shattered, and the listeners are left to ponder the host's malevolent riddle, their fate entwined with that of Adam until the correct answer is surfaced in the comment section. Fiction. This toothache is killing me. I did everything right. Brushed twice a day. Flossed. I even avoided sugar as best as I could. Still, I got to 30 and my tooth started aching. The molar on the right. I ignored it as long as possible. I hadn't gone to a dentist since I was on my parents' plan. I don't even have dental insurance as far as I know. But the pain was becoming overwhelming. I was only chewing food on the left side of my mouth. The throbbing would keep me up at night, a sharp sensation that would vibrate down my spine and somehow hurt all over. I sucked it up, did the adult thing, and made a dentist appointment. The receptionist made fun of me at first. Haven't had an appointment in 30 years, but was quick to comfort me too. Before I knew it, the hygienist called my name in the waiting room. She was a cutie patootie. I wish we were meeting under different circumstances. She set me down and I explained to her what was going on. The terrible pain in my molar. "Why don't we just have a look?" she said. "Okay, open wide." She grabbed her mirror and probe and leaned over me. Before she could insert the tools, she stopped dead in her tracks. She looked deep into my mouth. She was speaking softly. I need to get the dentist." She stood up hastily, went to the door, turned to me and said sternly, "Whatever you do, don't close your mouth." Damn, it's probably worse than I thought. I began to worry about the exorbitant cost of dental surgery. I sat there for several minutes, mouth agape. The dentist appeared with the hygienist cowering behind him. He walked in extremely cautiously, getting a safe distance from my head before trying to peek into my mouth. He was wide-eyed and began shaking. Did you eat something strange?" No. "Don't close your mouth." He went to the hygienist and they began arguing, figuring out who to call. Police, animal control, the government. They didn't know what to do. The hygienist was getting scared and raised her voice. Spit was starting to pool in my mouth. The receptionist came to see what the commotion was. She peered into my open mouth and screamed. She grabbed the drill and turned it on, ready to use it on me. "Don't!" the doctor yelled. "You might let it out." She threw the drill down and ran out of the room. The dental hygienist was quick to follow. The doctor stopped running only to poke his head in just enough to say, "We're going to get you help. Just whatever you do, don't close your mouth. Don't move at all. Sit right there." I've been sitting for 30 minutes. My jaw killed me from hanging open so long. I've had enough. I closed my mouth. My toothache disappeared instantly. I choked as I felt something claw its way down my throat. Fiction, Ocean View. "Come on, Brent," I cried merrily as I scrambled up on the flat white rocks, overlooking the sparkling blue ocean. I sneaked to look back. Ben was slouched, half turned away from me, his hands deep in his pockets, and his face covered by his hoodie. I resisted the urge to snap in frustration. "I wonder if we'll see any seals. Won't that be fun?" I felt I sounded like a schoolteacher. God, what was wrong with me? All I wanted was to have a little outing by the ocean walk with my son on this balmy spring evening, like we used to when he was younger. It was breaking my heart that he never wanted to spend any time with me. Everybody said it was natural. It's normal that teenagers pull away from their parents, act grouchy with their mom, refuse to engage, preferring instead to spend hours on their phones with their friends. Completely normal and natural. I needed to stop babying him and let him figure out things himself. Yet I refused. I couldn't back off, like everyone in the world wanted me to. I wanted to spend time with my son, talk to him, go out with him. Is that so crazy? Am I being so unreasonable after spending my entire waking and sleeping hours of the past 14 years worrying about and working for my son that I insist he get out of his stinky room for an hour and come with me to enjoy our beautiful local ocean views? We had walked these trails 100 times together barely a few years ago. Why was he acting now as though I was dragging him to watch a public execution? "Do you want to turn on my binoculars?" I said, ignoring his sour glance. I knew he was fuming because I had made him leave his phone at home. "Do you remember that time we saw a seal? Oh, you must have been, 9 or 10? He sighed heavily as I settled myself on the rock and brought out the binoculars. "I bet you all spot a seal before you." He mumbled something about, "Shut up about the seals already." But I pretended to ignore it. The fresh ocean breeze was lifting my spirits, and I was actually quite excited at the prospect of seeing seals. The binoculars glued to my face, I scanned the vast blue expanse. I could hear Ben kicking the base of rock. "Can we go now?" "What? I haven't seen a seal yet." "Oh." I fell silent. Through the binoculars, I saw a struggling, drowning man. Pure terror distorted his wet face. He seemed completely alone, just a little too far from the shoreline. "Mom, do you see a seal? Give me a turn." Ben suddenly spoke up loudly in my ear. I brought the binoculars down. Without their aid, the drowning man was barely visible. He could have been a speck of rock or trick of the waves by the curving far shore. "No!" I snatched the binoculars away. Ben frowned. "You said you wanted me to spot the seals," he said, and reached out again. I was determined not to let Ben see the drowning man. It was too late to help him. I was too far off. His face showed he was too close for death. I needed to protect my son from this sight. "Mom!" he cried familiarly. "There's no seal," I snapped. "But look, I think there's a crab in that tide pool." The old tricks of motherhood came easily to me. As he looked back distractedly, I raised my binoculars again, in time to see the hand go under for the last time. I caught his final glance, staring straight at me. Then I saw only waves. "There's no crabs, Mom. I want to see seals," Ben whined. I handed him the binoculars. "Here, darling, have a look. And then we must be getting back. It's getting chilly." True story. Something weird happened to me. Okay, I need some feedback after you listen to this story. I sent the story into a content creator to hopefully get some feedback, and it never got put out on their platform. It's not a big deal, but I'm seriously itching to know what the world thinks about it. So, any of your thoughts would be greatly appreciated. I'm an 18-year-old female. For context, I live in a small town near Houston, Texas. It's about 40 to 50 miles away from the city. I live in a nice, safe, middle-class, small neighborhood with a bunch of old, retired people in it. The neighborhood is really small, only with 7 streets. I'm in college, living with my parents and older sister. Our neighborhood has a nice hotel in it, and there are cops patrolling the neighborhood because of this. So anyway, this happened to me about 2 months ago. My parents left me and my sister home alone for a week to go on a road trip during spring break. It was my first time ever being alone in the house with no adult for so long. No big deal, I wasn't a high schooler anymore. I would keep myself alive and the house clean and free of parties and just continue going to work and school like normal. It was the second night of my parents' departure, and they were in New Mexico at this point. My sister has a boyfriend, so she spent a lot of time over at his house. I have a boyfriend as well, but he works all the time. So I found myself at home alone and bored at around 5 p.m. I decided to go to the gym, which the hotel in my neighborhood has one, so I got all my crap and headed out the door. My mom has this weird fear of someone trying to open all our windows and doors while we're asleep and kill us, so she's a heckler about locking things. I only lock the door if I'm leaving the house unoccupied for a long period of time, though. When I was leaving, I got a strange feeling to lock the front and back door. I was going to ignore it, but it kept bugging at me, so I went back inside and locked the front and back door. I also wanted to run to the gym, but at the last minute, before walking out of the door, I got a sudden sense of laziness and went to get my keys, which is when I got the feeling to lock the door. No big deal. I'm not good with intuition and I'm a paranoid person, so I didn't think too much of it. I go to the gym for about an hour and a half, and while I'm there, I get this random, terrible, gut-wrenching feeling that gives me bad anxiety. Now, I have a dog, and again, like I said, I'm a paranoid person, so my mind instantly went to the fact that my house is on fire, and my dog is trapped inside because I locked both of the doors and no one is going to be able to save him. Stupid, I know. In fact, so stupid that I didn't think it was actually possible, and I stayed and continued my workout at the gym with a lingering feeling of anxiety. I get done and I head home, and of course, when I get home in like 2 minutes, my house is still intact. I get out and started heading inside, but I noticed something on my front door handle. My door handle is curved into a long C that attaches to the wood with a latch on top of the C that you have to press with your thumb to open the door. Wrapped tightly around my door handle was a brown napkin that wasn't there when I locked the door before I left for the gym. I stopped instantly and thought of the recent fentanyl poisonings. How people were putting liquid fentanyl on napkins and money, killing the people who came in contact with them with an overdose. I called my parents, who answered and explained what happened. My mom was a bit spooked and told me not to touch it, while my dad was trying to be rational, telling me it was probably just an advertisement that someone put on our door. That's clearly not what it was, but I got some gloves out of my car and used them to take the brown napkin off. It was clear that it wasn't an ad, even if it had maybe been ripped off, because my dad said it looked like someone ripped an ad off our door handle whenever I FaceTimed them. It had the texture of a thick paper bag, but I didn't look at it long enough to see exactly what it was. I threw it instantly on the ground, unlocked the door, cleaned the handles with Clorox wipes, and the lock and keys, and my hands, and then I washed the gloves. I left the paper bag on the ground for a while I stayed locked up in my house, not knowing what to do with it. I kept looking outside of the windows because I just knew someone had come and put that on our door and was wondering if they were still out there. I never saw anything or anyone, or even got a weird feeling of being watched. My sister and her boyfriend got home. Then I got some courage, put some more gloves on, and went to go pick up and examine the brown paper bag with them. I brought it inside and we all looked at it underneath the light. It was 100% clearly a small brown paper bag. It looked like something a restaurant put sauces or silverware in for to-go orders. It was crumpled up due to how tightly it was wrapped around the door handle, so I unfolded it. I almost dropped the paper bag again because what I saw on it scared me. It was a clear, thick liquid that kind of resembled snot, smeared across the part of the paper bag that was touching the door handle. My sister and her boyfriend and I kind of stayed silent, all thinking the same thing: fentanyl. But the longer time passes, the more I think about what it really could have been. Nothing weird or strange has happened since then. I highly doubt we have druggies in our neighborhood that would just come up to our door on a high whim and stick trash in it. I question if it was truly fentanyl. I mentioned me living in Houston because it's one of the biggest hotspots of sex trafficking in the country. And I'm curious to know if that maybe had anything to do with it. Perhaps they are marking my house, or maybe it's nothing. I don't think it's nothing though, because someone intentionally came and put that brown paper bag on our door and got the heck out of there during the short time while I was at the gym. I wish I had a Ring camera so that I had more answers, but I don't. Do you have any answers for me? These questions always go on in the back of my head. I'm sure, of course, you don't have the full answer, but what could this mean? And why did it happen to me? True story. My only unexplainable thing. Okay, so I used to live in a small town in rural Canada. There was this old folks' home for the mentally unwell that was closed a long time before I moved there. During the day, people would go on the property and hang out in the well-kept grass and trees. The town still took care of the surrounding grounds for this specific reason. The actual building was locked up, but teenagers would break into the building to basically scare themselves, myself included on a few occasions. Only with 5 or so people, little drunk or a bit high, but even stone cold sober, it was lots of fun, probably due to feeling somewhat safe in numbers. And literally nothing actually happened that couldn't be easily explained with logic. Noises, paper shifting, etc. Inevitably, the large group of teens that we were would make too much noise and the cops would get called. One night, me and my best friend, whom is a serious skeptic, decided to break or get into a part of the building we knew hadn't been gotten into by anyone. This time just the two of us, because the more people you bring, the more likely the police are going to show up due to a disturbance being called in by someone living across from the property. We've had to book it from the cops before and we didn't want to tonight, especially if we were going to a place that no one had been before, where we didn't know the exits. To get an idea of what it looks like, 5 stories tall with the 4th and 5th stories making a slight tower jutting out from the middle. Old brick in the front, modern cement blocks that were painted over, like in schools. At the back where you could tell stuff was added in later years. The newer parts of the building had been broken into by kids a lot, but the main building had thick metal doors and the windows that might be able to be open were on the 3rd story. It looked like an old school or church or asylum all got cobbled together. There were other little structures around the main building. Pool house, gymnasium, all ransacked by us idiot kids. Not the main floor of the old building, though. We climbed on the roof of the boiler room at the back of the building by piling up furniture debris we found in one of the ransacked storage buildings behind the main building. We pulled off one of the plywood covers nailed over a hole in the roof. For a skylight or a missing vent, not sure. That led into the boiler room and used the pipes along the ceiling and walls to climb down. This part of the building still looked semi-modern, and you could tell it was added closer to when it was closed. There was an exit that only opened from the inside, so at least leaving would be easy if needed. Me and my buddy are pumped at this point. The pipes made it easy to get down, and everything was going as good as it could. We make our way to the back of the room and find the door leading to the untouched main floor of the building. We're halfway expecting the door to be locked, like all the other metal ones, but I opened it with a achy, loud against the silence, creak. The door opened to the middle of a hallway leading left to right. First thing we noticed, dust everywhere. It made a 1/4-inch film on everything. We both went right, as it led into an interesting-looking main area with sheet-covered furniture. We used our phone screens as lights and took a couple steps into the main room, and it hit me like a train. I'll try my best to phrase this understandably. All of a sudden, I felt sick. Not throw-up sick, but I'm gonna die sick. Like my brain said, run, leave, escape, now. I started shaking for no reason. It was so jarring. If I had to compare it to something, I felt like someone was right behind me with the intent to end me. It was weird because of how sudden it was. Like a switch went off. I was excited and positive right up until the point where I was convinced we were about to get jumped or murdered. I looked at my buddy, and his face had the same expression of what I felt. Genuinely terrified, white as a ghost. I think that might have scared me even more, honestly, because I've never seen him like that. Remember, neither of us saw anything at this point. No ghosts, no distinct noises after the door creak, no creepy dolls or skeletons. Just thick dust and sheet-covered furniture. It made no sense that I felt so threatened, and looking at my friend, I knew he felt it too. Without saying a word to each other, we turned our heels and walked towards the boiler room. We didn't tell each other that either of us wanted to go. We just started backtracking faster than we came in. I'm leading us at this point, and my blood ran ice cold when I noticed something on the other side of the door we left open. A set of fresh-looking footprints that led down the left route of the hall. We both went right to get into the large main room. The prints were positively not ours. As we got closer, it got worse. Those footprints started 8 to 10 feet from the door, in the middle of the hall. It looked like a person teleported 10 feet from the door mid-stride and walked the opposite way and around the corner. We booked out of there as fast as possible. Thank damn it, there was an exit in the boiler room, because I can't imagine climbing up those pipes in that panic. Literally never went back to that building. I asked my buddy what he saw on the way back to his house, and he said he saw the prints and noticed how far they were from the door, so I know I wasn't seeing things. I am an atheist. I don't have a good explanation for this, and I'd really love one. To clarify, we didn't see them appear. We saw them after they had been made, and they looked as new as ours. Bonus fact: the tower had a window at the top, and some people claim that they could see someone standing in it at night sometimes. There was a couple of times when I swear something looked like it could be in the window before this whole incident happened, but it could easily just be my mind playing tricks. Do any of you have any explanation as to what the hell it was we saw in that old building that night? True story: missing from the cabin in the woods. One 4th of July weekend in 2011, a buddy of mine that I'll refer to as Todd ended up in a pretty precarious situation. What follows is the story as he told it to me. It was supposed to be a fun weekend up the hill and in the woods at Todd's friend Troy's cabin. Troy was to introduce Todd to a girl he had also invited. So naturally, Todd was looking forward to some devious fun for the holiday weekend. As luck would have it, Todd and his new date clicked and soon found themselves downstairs for some alone time fun. Shortly after, Todd and his date disappeared downstairs. Troy decided to go out for a little while. A little while later, as Todd and his date were getting into it, Troy returned to his cabin with some company. Upon hearing foreign voices upstairs, Todd went upstairs to see who was there. To Todd's dismay, he found that Troy had brought home someone that he disliked. A guy named Ace, for the sake of the story. Seeing Ace, Todd got angry and an argument ensued between Todd and Troy, while poor Ace stood awkwardly near the doorway. Cue Troy's girlfriend entering only to stand next to Ace, with a bewildered expression on her face. Todd had rushed upstairs in his boxers at first, thinking that it was just guys that had arrived initially. So he and Troy quickly went downstairs to argue further. As Todd and Troy's argument diminished, Troy decided that he, his girlfriend, and Ace would go night swimming at a nearby creek for a while to cool off. For whatever reason, Troy threw on Todd's shorts to swim, in which had Todd's keys, wallet, and smokes in the pocket. Troy and his company had already been gone for a few minutes before Todd realized what had happened. So, Todd and his date continued on downstairs while Troy, Ace, and Troy's girlfriend returned to the cabin. Right as Todd heard them returning, though, he went upstairs to confront Troy, fuming. Todd demanded his shorts back while yelling about his stuff in the pockets during Troy's swim. As the two argued back and forth for a while, Troy's girlfriend, Todd's date, and Ace tried to pretty much blend with the wallpaper. As Todd demanded that Troy take his shorts off then and there, Troy informed him that he would not be stripping down in front of everyone. That was when Ace cut in to have Troy's back, making the argument even worse. But Ace knew that Todd had quite a reputation for fighting and not losing. So in order to prove himself to Troy, he jumped right into that argument. After a little more arguing, Troy and his girlfriend left again in Todd's shorts. Ace stayed behind though, for some reason. Maybe because Troy had left without his backpack full of his personal and important items, we'll say. Eventually, Todd and his date went back downstairs to go back at it. Ace, of course, stayed upstairs and kept company with Todd's pit bull. They all expected Troy and his girlfriend to return that night, for at least his backpack. But when everyone woke up the next morning, they realized that Troy and his girlfriend had not returned to the cabin. Everyone was puzzled as to what Troy was up to. But since Troy had left his cell phone in his backpack, they all just hung around the cabin and waited for Troy. The second night came and went with no word from Troy or his girlfriend. It wasn't until they got up on the third day with still no Troy that they finally started to get worried. Alarm bells were definitely going off for the trio. Todd decided to try and call Troy's girlfriend again, like he had the previous day when her phone seemed to be switched off. That day it finally rang and she picked up. Fear crept into her voice when she realized that Troy wasn't back at the cabin, like she assumed he would have been. So her and Todd agreed to start calling around to see if they could track down Troy, but no one had heard from Troy at all. Next, a panicking Todd called a few friends up to the isolated cabin to help search the nearby woods for Troy. Not a single trace of Troy was found. It was Todd who made the decision to call Troy's girlfriend and have her report Troy missing. She did just that, but when asked of Troy's last known whereabouts, she gave them the honest answer. She told them that Troy was last seen at his cabin having a heated argument with Todd. The problem with that was that Todd had a pretty well-known reputation for fighting and not generally losing. At this point, in which the following events took place, Troy had been missing for 3 days, so he was declared lost at that point. Apparently, the cops decided they should take it seriously. The following morning, Todd, his date, and Ace were fast asleep, only to be startled awake to the sounds of both the front door being kicked in and people running around on the roof. The SWAT team flooded in, subduing the trio inside. At one point, one of the SWAT officers said, "I will shoot you, and I will shoot that effing dog." Upon hearing that, Ace suddenly popped his face up from off the floor and exclaimed, "Why are you going to shoot the dog? Don't shoot the dog." Of course, the dog did not get hurt at all. What came next was the trio getting questioned by a couple of detectives portraying in the usual good cop, bad cop scenario. Unfortunately for Todd, though, he was the last person seen with Troy and they were arguing. Couple that with Todd's reputation for fighting and, well, that made Todd the number one and only suspect in Troy's disappearance. It also didn't help that the detectives had found some clothing left by the hot tub, and some of the clothing had drops of blood on it, though Todd insisted that he didn't even know whose clothes they were. Search and rescue came in next to comb the surrounding woods for clues to Troy's whereabouts. They searched for hours while Todd, Ace, and Todd's date were still being questioned, but they focused mainly on Todd. After a couple of hours of interrogation, Todd finally got irritated and insisted that Troy had been missing for 3 days at that point. He could either be dead or alive, but they should be focusing their efforts on finding Troy. Oblivious to Todd and company was the fact that search and rescue had located Troy, deep in the woods and hours away from his cabin. Troy was found passed out on a large rock, naked and just hours away from his demise. The next thing that Todd, his date, and Ace and the detectives heard was the sound of the search and rescue's hospital chopper blades, cutting through the air and getting closer to the cabin. As they peered out the door, they seen the approaching chopper with Troy suspended in a blue diaper-like thing from it. The chopper was looking for a safe place to lower Troy enough for emergency ground personnel to be able to reach him. As the smoke was still clearing on the whole situation a couple of days later, Todd was informed about the facts that led up to Troy's disappearance. Apparently, Troy and his girlfriend left the cabin on the night he vanished to simply cool off after the argument with a nice walk in the woods that surrounded the cabin. But right before they left for that walk, Troy's girlfriend had stolen his debit card. Shortly after setting out on their walk, Troy and his girlfriend got into an argument themselves. They got separated after that, and Troy's girlfriend ended up walking herself back to the main road, where she'd called a ride, leaving Troy in the woods and assuming he'd find his way back to the cabin. So, basically, Troy's girlfriend turned her phone off for the next couple of days in order to avoid Troy's angry phone calls about his debit card, while she partied the whole time. When she did finally turn her phone back on, she received Todd's concerned call about Troy. She was shocked to learn that Troy had been missing for the last couple of days. Troy ended up being relatively okay considering his circumstances. Todd ended up moving out of state shortly after, which pretty much dissolved their friendship. As far as Ace, Todd's date, and Troy's girlfriend, well, they're in the wind, I guess you could say. I'm almost positive, though, that none of the people involved in this story will ever be able to forget the events that took place over those fateful 3 days at that cabin. Fiction story, The Eyes Game. We're terribly sorry for the delay in releasing yet another of our rituals to help one become attuned to themselves. Our company has been under fire from countless lawsuits since our last few uploads, forcing us to reconsider some of the wording used in these guides. Do you ever consider how others perceive you? It's difficult for humans to comprehend how the outside world views their actions or character, resulting in much anxiety that plagues these modern ages. Fret no more. This guide should provide you with the ability to understand how someone, something, or society in general views you. Whether you use it to find out if your crush thinks you're cute, or if you just want a general idea of how strangers view you, these steps are the answer to all you seek. While this guide can be used to see yourself through someone else's eyes, we must warn you of the progressive dangers. For those who only wish to see themselves through the lens of society and strangers, this game poses the least amount of danger. For those who find themselves looking into the minds of specific individuals, we warn that the closer this individual is to you mentally, the potential of more damage and danger is increased. The rules. Number 1. Similar to our prior guides, we recommend you find a small and vacant room. The room should have a number of doors and windows equal to the number of eyes you want to observe you. For those who desire the insight of strangers or society, we recommend a room with only a single door. Number 2. Remove any electrical appliances in the room, including light fixtures. Instead, provide a large candle that will be placed in each corner of the room. Do not light them until you are fully prepared to begin the game. Number 3. Bring a small cot into the room and put it on the wall opposite the door or window. If the room has multiple doors or windows on various walls, place it in the center of the room. Be aware that having multiple walls to watch will increase the amount of danger you are in without benefit. It is recommended that you find a room with the amount of doors and windows you desire on a singular wall for the best chance of retrieval. Number 4. After the room has been prepared, wait for the sky to darken before beginning. It is advised to begin at around 1 to 3 a.m. The earlier you begin, the more knowledge you obtain. Still, we recommend you ensure that it is absolutely dark out before you light the first candle. Failure to do this may result in a spatial anomaly, wherein you will be unable to leave the room and re-enter the world you originally came from. Number 5. Once you are positive that it is safe to begin, light the candles in this order: northeast, southeast, southwest, and northwest. Once done, you should notice the doors and windows are now closed if they were open prior. Do not open them. Number 6. You must now go and lay in the cot. This cot should not be elevated like a normal bed, and instead lie flat on the floor. Your feet should face the doors and windows. Do not fall asleep. Instead, you will hear a strange whispering erupt from behind the barriers. Answer them with the full name of whoever you wish to view yourself through. Make sure to wait 5 seconds between each name if you have multiple people in mind. Those who wish to view themselves through strangers or society simply say, "I am myself, but who am I?" Number 7. Now that you are prepared, remain silent. You must not speak another word until daylight breaks and ends the game. Speaking would mean giving them the ability to physically interact with you, which tends to have gruesome consequence. Number 8. Over time, you will begin to see the door and windows begin to crack open. You will feel a strong sense of presence behind these barriers. You may even begin to see shapes flicker in and out of them. Remain calm. As long as you stare at the darkness seeping through the cracks, they cannot fully enter. Over time, you should begin seeing distinct eyes staring back at you from the crevices. Make sure to maintain eye contact with any pairs of eyes you see until they return into the darkness. This is partially why having multiple doors or windows tends to lead to dire consequences. It is also why having to look around at multiple walls can result in the death of the participant. Number 9. Throughout the night, you may find yourself becoming drowsy. It is vital that you do not fall asleep. If you feel as though this drowsiness isn't natural, you should slowly rise from your cot. It is likely one of your candles has been snuffed out and will require you to relight it. You will find a match lying just outside of the door, inches from the darkness on the other side. If you are in a room with multiple doors and windows, it will appear in front of a random location, barely outside of the darkness. This is the only time you must go against what you've been told to do prior. As soon as you leave the cot, do not make eye contact with the darkness beyond any of your barriers. You should be safe as long as you don't peer into the darkness or exit the room. Return to the prior rules upon relighting the candle and laying back down. As soon as daylight breaks, you may find yourself immediately put into a deep sleep. This is natural. Enjoy the rest as your mind is given pieces of memories that do not belong to you. The longer you played and the more people you asked to watch you, the longer your rest will be. Upon waking, you should be able to distinctly think of the person or persons you chose and intuitively know their thoughts and opinions on you. Congratulations! No more shall you be left wondering what others think of you. Instead, you can confidently approach people knowing their full thoughts on you, and with luck, you won't have to redo this guide in order to keep up. Instead, you should intuitively know what the other or others think of you over the course of your interactions, regardless of their words. For the unlucky, it is possible that you will have to sleep with the candle on and in a bed that isn't elevated from the ground. You will know if you must do this if you wake up in the middle of the night at some point and notice your doors and windows are fully opened. We apologize for the inconvenience of this, though it is a rare event that doesn't occur to all participants. We hope that you continue to support our organization and its efforts to provide you with guides that can help you ease the mental stresses of daily life. Being a human is hard, and it's important to have the opportunity to make it easier. True story. If you see someone waving you down on a desolate highway, don't stop. I was on an assignment for the Army, making my way up from San Antonio, Texas, to Tacoma, Washington. It was a long drive, and they gave me 6 days to report to my new unit, but I didn't mind. I loved road trips. There's nothing like the freedom of exploring the world by yourself. The first day of my journey, I planned to get as much driving in as possible so I could spend a few days in Utah, a sort of mini vacation, you could say. This was January and the days were short, so maximizing the amount of daylight I had was crucial. I got up extra early that morning, carried the last of my bags out to my Corolla, signed out of my old unit, and hit the road at roughly 5 a.m. It was an amazing day. I saw the landscape transform around me as I headed further west than I had ever been in my life. From the San Antonio metropolitan area to the savannas of the Edwards Plateau, to the pancake flat farmland of the Great Plains region, America's breadbasket. Finally, the farms opened up into prairie and I saw the "Welcome to New Mexico, the Land of Enchantment" sign. Now I was really in the middle of nowhere. Continuing on US Route 380, I eventually found myself in Roswell. I could have gotten a few more hours of driving in and made it to Albuquerque, but I figured since I was in no rush, I might as well see what Roswell had to offer. Who knows if I would get a chance to visit again. As a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious, as Mr. Ballin would say, I took a self-guided tour of the shops and attractions. The next day, I continued to Albuquerque, then westward on Interstate 40. By the time I reached Gallup and started northbound on US Route 491, I still had 2 hours of driving left before crossing the border into Colorado, and another 45 minutes before I would get to Cortez. My planned stop for the night. However, my daylight was already running out, as sunset was at 6 p.m. I got Starbucks and refreshed myself for the final stretch. It was supposed to be easy, just a straight shot. But looking back on it now, I figured that had I decided to stop in Albuquerque instead of Roswell that night previous, I would have already been in Colorado by now and possibly be making my way into Utah. I would have saved myself from what was waiting for me on that desolate highway. Route 491 stretched far into the Navajo Nation. On either side of me were endless expanses of prairie bookended by dark indigo mountains on the horizon. To my left, the sky glowed a faint orange-purple, the light slowly dying down the smoldering embers in a fire, until finally plunging the land into darkness. Every now and then, I would see the forlorn headlights of another car passing by, which gave me a bit of relief that I wasn't alone. I also had a road trip playlist on to keep me company, and call me ironic, but Hotel California was playing. After passing the small, lonely town of Newcomb, the next piece of civilization would be Shiprock. However, between the two was a 36-mile stretch of absolute nothingness. An abyss I had to cross. I was not ready for what I was about to witness. After several miles and having not seen another car on the road, I saw something strange emerge from the horizon. Barely lit by the moonlight, I thought it was a road sign at first. Then, as I came closer, I realized it was a person, walking on the shoulder of the road, headed in my direction. I squinted, trying my hardest to focus on the figure. In the darkness, I could tell they were wearing a poncho of some sort, with long black hair flowing down past their chest. Who could be walking out here all alone at night? I thought. Whoever it was, they had no lights, no reflectors, no strobes of any kind to signal to passing cars that they were there. And they walked on the pavement, dangerously close to oncoming traffic. I pulled to the left a bit, giving them a wide berth. Suddenly, my stereo cut out, as if I had turned it off. The screen went completely black, and my phone disconnected from Bluetooth. While this was unusual, it certainly did happen from time to time, so I thought nothing of it. As I approached, I saw the person raise their right arm, as if to flag me down and hitch a ride. Oh, no, I thought. There's no way that's happening, buddy. As my headlights swept by, I realized it was a man, dressed in a button-up shirt, a wool poncho, jeans, and cowboy boots. His large belt buckle glinted as the lights passed him. But in that split second, I realized with abject shock that not only were his eyes painfully wide open, but they seemed to be tracking me. Somehow, he was able to see me through the glare of my headlights and look me dead in the eyes, not breaking contact until I passed. I was shaken for a bit, but my nerves gradually subsided. My stereo abruptly turned back on and my music continued playing. I brushed everything off as simply my imagination. The darkness and the shadows playing tricks on my mind. Besides, the man was behind me. I figured he must have been drunk. Indian reservations sadly had high rates of alcoholism. I look in my rearview mirror. He was gone. I couldn't see him. Maybe he's too far behind me? No, that couldn't be. It must be too dark. Maybe. I drove on trying to figure out what had just happened, but at the same time, forcing myself not to think about it. Just when I thought I had moved on, I saw another shape in the distance. Getting closer, I realized it was another figure. Another person walking alone at night. There's no way. They walked along the shoulder of the road, swaying back and forth. Slowly, I could make out that this person was also wearing a poncho. Then, I saw what looked like long black hair reaching down past the chest. No, there's no way. It was the man. The same man. But how? The man raised his arm again, trying to flag me down. What did this guy want? I kept up my pace with no intention of stopping for any reason. Just like last time, my stereo turned off again. Suddenly, the man leapt out onto the road, arms waving frantically. I swerved into the left lane, narrowly avoiding him. In my headlights, I noticed he had the same wide-eyed look, his gaze locked onto mine. I also saw that his clothes did not look as they did the first encounter. Once they were clean, if not well worn, but now they were soiled and tattered, rags barely hanging on his withered frame. His hair was wild and unkempt, with clods of dried dirt stuck in the locks, but his eyes remained the same. My heart nearly burst through my chest at the sudden shock. Hyperventilating, I slowed down and glanced into the rearview mirror to make sure he was all right. Nothing could have prepared me for what I was about to see. The man was running. He was sprinting towards me. I centered the wheel and accelerated, hoping to get as much distance from him as possible. But as I continued to speed up, so did he. Faster and faster I drove, but every time I looked into the mirror, I would still see him right behind me, perfectly keeping pace, his body tinted red by my taillights. I could feel my temples throbbing and my hands getting slick with sweat on the steering wheel. I was sick to my stomach. There's no freaking way. I looked forward, hoping to see a faint glimmer of light from the town ahead, but I was still too far away. I looked back at the rearview mirror. The man was gone. I should have been relieved, but I knew better. Where the hell did he go? I looked around, hoping to regain a visual on him. I couldn't see anything. Taking a breath, I refocused on the road, but kept my guard up. Just keep driving, I told myself. Only a few more miles to go. Out of the corner of my right eye, I saw something. Another shape. It wasn't the man, at least, I don't think so. I glanced over, bracing myself for whatever was going to meet my sight. It looked like an animal. Some kind of animal, though I couldn't make out exactly what it was. Under the moonlight, I could see it running alongside my car, its forelimbs reaching out in long strides, its back undulating like a dog. Closer and closer it came. The closer it was, the more of it I could see, little by little. Then I noticed its limbs were far too long for its body. Its body was too short. It had no tail. The head was oddly round, and from it came a trail of long, black hair. I slammed my foot on the gas, pushing my car's engine harder than it had ever been pushed before. By now, I was clocking well over 110 miles per hour. But this creature, it kept up. It wasn't phased. It simply ran faster and faster to match my speed. Just what in the hell was this thing? How could anyone or anything run this fast? The entity seemed to have endless stamina. Just how long could it keep this up? Just how much faster could it go? Soon, my car would hit its top speed. And then what? How long could it maintain that before breaking down? It wouldn't be long until my engine overheats. But regardless, I would eventually run out of gas, and when I do, what would happen if that thing got me? At 120 miles per hour, my car had reached its limit. This was the fastest I could go. But the creature continued its pursuit. My temperature gauge was approaching the red, and so was my tachometer. I couldn't keep this up any longer. Suddenly, like the beacon of a lighthouse on a tumultuous sea, the first light of a shipwreck came into view. It was close. So close. If I could just go a little longer, I could make it into town. to safety. I pressed on. I fixed my eyes on the lights, growing brighter on the horizon. They bloomed outwards, glimmering in the night air. Though it was a small town, it was a sight for sore eyes in my situation. Looking in my periphery, I saw the undulation of the creature's spine as it kept pace with my car. But now it was slipping away, steering further and farther from the road. It suddenly hit me just how hard my heart was beating. Beads of sweat dripped down my face. I looked over. The creature was gone, but this time, the feeling of dread had also gone with it. My stereo once again turned back on, and as my music resumed, I breathed a deep sigh of relief. I let off the accelerator. The man, the creature, whatever it was finally gone for good. Having white-knuckled the steering wheel the whole time without realizing it, my hands were extremely sore, but I was glad to have made through. A week later, I told another soldier in my unit about what I had experienced. Being originally from Albuquerque, she was familiar with the Native American legends of the Southwest. The conversation steered towards a certain creature that she would not dare speak the name of. She also told me that the highway I took was well known for all sorts of paranormal phenomena. Google what Route 491 used to be called, and everything will make sense. Be careful out there, everyone. Fiction story. You are what you eat. Those aren't the words a 6-year-old girl wants to hear from an old, disgruntled man in a fast food restaurant. I remember the sudden coldness of his emaciated hand on my shoulder, the vicious voids in place of his eyes, the anger on his lips as he nodded his head at the beef burger in my hands. I'd never felt such fear, and I started to quiver in terror. Fortunately, my dad aggressively shooed the creeper away, and I found myself eyeballing the burger. Freaking arsehole, my dad muttered whilst my mom consoled me. Why was he bothering Amelia? What's wrong with my food, Dad? I asked, sniffling. He smiled, ruffing my hair. Nothing, sweetheart. That was just an unwell man. Ignore him. But my dad was wrong, as I would learn over the coming weeks. After eating that burger, my sense of smell drastically improved. I didn't need as much sleep, and I found myself craving food that I knew I shouldn't eat. I imagine you've started to put things together. My traits changed with every piece of meat I ate. Only meat. The primary horror was the sudden onset of uncontrollable animalistic urges. I often felt my intelligence slipping away after assuming an animal's mindset. It was just hard to rationalize and process thoughts, and I was too afraid to tell my parents. I know that was stupid, but I was only 6, and I thought I'd done something wrong. But I was smart enough to put the pieces of the jigsaw together, and I decided to become vegetarian after a week of experiencing transformations from meat-based meals. The strange thoughts, feelings, and sensory changes vanished after a week or so. My humanity returned, and I put the terrifying experience out of my mind. But a terrible thing happened last weekend, nearly 20 years after the torture that I half convinced myself to be a figment of a child's overactive imagination. I accidentally ate meat. I love you guys, Paul drunkenly announced. I was enjoying a wonderful camping trip with my friends, and Paul secretively cooked dinner, refusing to let anyone intervene. He wanted the dish to be a surprise. He clumsily handed out plates of colorful food, and I exchanged a concerned look with Rachel, my best friend. "What is this?" she asked, smirking. "That's for me to know, and you two, I don't know," Paul snorted, losing his train of thought. As soon as I swallowed the first mouthful of food, I knew something was wrong. It was a sickening sensation I hadn't felt since childhood. Something was taking control of my mind and body. "Paul," I groaned, plate trembling in my hands. "Is there meat in this?" Mike's eyes widened. "Paul, you idiot! You know Amelia's a vegetarian." "Oh, shit," he gasped. I must have forgot." "You forgot?" Rachel cried incredulously. "I've not been friends with her for that long," he muttered sheepishly. I'm sorry, Amelia." You don't understand," I growled, wrestling with a bombardment of overwhelming thoughts and desires. "What meat did you feed me?" "I wanted to impress you guys," he said sadly. "It's Nile crocodile meat in a roasted vegetable stew. I bought it online and had it imported. Cost a fortune, but..." "You effing moron," Mike interrupted. "Amelia, are you going to be..." "Wait, Amelia?" I was crawling on my hands and knees towards the tent. When I consume meat, it's never an outwardly visible transformation, but one of the mind. That being said, there were physical changes beneath the surface. Changes more terrifying than any transformation I'd ever experienced before. Of course, I'd eaten crocodile, one of the Earth's deadliest animals, often unreasonably cruel creatures. Do I know that from reading about them? No. I know it because I felt it. I'm sorry, Amelia," Paul sniffled, stumbling around the campfire to help me. "Are you gonna be sick? Is that what's wrong?" I'll play the game with him, I thought. But it wasn't my thought. Driven by urges beyond my control, I found myself turning to look at Paul, softening him with crocodile tears. Rachel and Mike were watching me with worried expressions, but Paul was too inebriated to be wary of my erratic behavior. I feel awful," he said. Let me give you a hug." I didn't want to lull my friends into a false sense of security, but I was helpless in the face of the horror that was stealing my body from me. And for a fleeting moment, between the blackened trees of the forest, I saw him. The haunting man who cursed me 20 years ago. Has he been watching over me for all of that time? I fearfully wondered as the wicked wizard took the reins. Internally screaming, I could only watch as my body lunged at Paul and my teeth sank into his forearm. All I could think was that his surprise tasted sweet. But again, it wasn't my thought. I don't even think it was the thought of a crocodile. No, it was the man who had been following me for 20 years. Paul wailed at the gaping wound in his arm, and I joined him. They weren't crocodile tears. I genuinely felt a harrowing sense of horror beyond words. After all, I was trapped in my own body, helplessly watching the blood trickle down Paul's arm. And then I watched my friends run away, leaving me to contend with the terrifying man in the trees. They didn't even notice him. "You are what you eat," the specter whispered. "Oh, Amelia, you were being well behaved for so many years." I sobbed intensely. "Please, stop this. Help me." "Yes," he smiled. "I can make it stop. Why don't you eat this?" The elderly, crooked man held something small in his left hand. It was a dark object that I couldn't distinguish. "It'll make everything better," he cooed, striding towards me. "You are what you eat, and this is death itself." I screamed, or attempted to scream, but only could feasibly gasp for air as I crawled backwards. I wished my friends hadn't fled. I was alone in that blackened forest, staring into the face of hell incarnate. "I don't want to die," I pleaded, blubbering as I had in that restaurant. "Then you must accept your fate," he said, smiling. There's a hole in my memory after the perturbing man's final line. When I woke in my bed, I had no recollection of returning home. What did I do for the rest of the evening? I've no idea what's real anymore. Did I hallucinate my encounter with the demonic man in the forest? I don't think so, but I definitely know the horror at the campfire was real because my friends won't reply to my texts. I don't blame them. I pray that Paul simply ghosts me rather than getting the police involved. The cravings are crippling. I feel violent. So violent. And my sense of empathy is dwindling. I'm wrestling with the very concept of mortality. Do I even care about what happened to Paul? That's the terrifying question. If I avoid people for a few more days, my mind and body should return to normal. But what then? I have to live the rest of my life in fear of eating meat. I fear for those around me, but I also fear the man who inflicted this nightmare upon me. Why me? Why not any other meat eater in that restaurant? I was just a child, an innocent child. I don't know what kind of message he was trying to send. I fear that he might make me do something much worse next time. Fictional story. My aunt was a nurse in an asylum. I found this book in her attic. My aunt used to be a nurse at the local asylum up until it closed in 1979. I didn't know much about her time there, but she did tell me she was writing a book about several patients who'd intrigued her over the years. I kept asking her to read it, but she told me I couldn't until it was finished. But that never happened. About a month ago, my aunt passed away, and while we were cleaning out her house, I secretly hoped I'd find the book. On the third day of cleaning, I did finally find it, or rather, part of it. I have changed the name and location of the facility and patients for my own protection. Anyway, here's as much as I found so far. In the southern part of Vermont, there lies a small forest, and just beyond that forest lies the sprawling campus of Ransom Hills Hospital for the Insane. Within the walls of this hospital live some of Vermont's most troubled residents. This story will introduce a few of them to you. The first of whom is Reginald T. Simmons. Reginald was admitted on July 15, 1945, and died in his sleep June 8, 1957. He was 19 when admitted and 31 at the time of his death. He was admitted due to severe schizophrenia and depression. He is the most normal patient we will meet today. Here is his story as told through his journal entries. July 15, 1945. They brought me here. They really did. I don't want to be here and they know it. But he don't tell them, it would be best. They should have known he'd kill me if I came here. I know I'll die here and it will be quick. July 20th, 1945. He came again last night. He told me I shouldn't have come here. He said he'd be back to kill me, and I knew he really will. He's a horrible-looking thing with red, beady eyes, but no other facial expressions. He won't tell me his name. He says I don't need that information. July 26, 1945. I don't know how much time I have left, but I know it isn't long. He visited me last night. He told me it won't be painful when he takes me. I hope he isn't lying to me again. After this, Reginald stopped writing for 13 years. He also quit speaking or verbalizing in any way until the night before he died. June 7th, 1957. He's coming for me tonight. He told me it's finally my turn. I don't know when exactly he's coming, but I know it's tonight. I hope one day my parents and brother will see this and know I love them, and I no longer blame them. Reginald's brother Simon approved an autopsy, and it was found that he had painlessly passed in his sleep. His heart just stopped. It is believed that he knew subconsciously he was going to die, and that's why he wrote what he did. Our next patient we will learn about is Mary Jane Simpson. She was admitted on August 5th, 1960 at age 12. She was one of the youngest patients in the whole facility. She was believed to have ADHD, autism, and severe regressive episodes. Her mother, Judy, brought her to Ransom Hills because she couldn't handle her behavior anymore and was worried she'd hurt herself or others. Mary was given a journal, but her doctors was unsure if she could write, so they didn't expect much. Mary was discharged at age 20 in 1968 with massive improvements due to medications she was put on. She went on to live a normal life. Here are a few of her journal entries. My name is Mary Jane Simpson. My mom says I have to stay here for a while so they can help me. I don't want to stay. I want my mom. The staff believes she wrote this entry during a regressive episode, thus leading to it looking and sounding like a child wrote it. September 2nd, 1960. I don't remember most of my first month here. My doctors tell me I was in another regressive episode from it. I'm so glad to be back to normal, even if it's just for a few weeks. I've been hearing the voices again. My doctor, Dr. James, says they'll go away once he gets approval to put me on Medication. I'm hopeful the medications will help. All of this is so strange, but the one thing I can't wrap my head around is how my aunt got a hold of these patients' journals. They were supposedly kept locked up. Hopefully, I'll find the rest soon. And that, dear listeners, is the end of these true, scary stories. And yes, some were fiction. If you are asleep, I hope Slumberland is treating you kindly. If you're awake and listening, I hope you have enjoyed the selection. Until next time, I'll read to you soon. Have yourself a good morning, a good afternoon, or